Hi, I'm Martha. Welcome to my sewing studio. And I've already looked through this pattern, so I know what's gonna happen. This is part 2 of my series on sewing a winter coat. I'm making an alpaca boucle coat that I will be adding sequins to, but you could be making any kind of coat to join me in sewing a coat this winter. Today we're gonna take a look at my pattern tissue as well as pattern instructions. Make sure there's nothing unexpected in there. And then I'm also gonna talk about some books that I recommend having as reference material while you're making a coat like this. I think they are especially helpful to have on hand if you're making a vintage coat where there's an assumption that the person using the pattern already has that knowledge in their mind or has those books in their personal library. You might also want them for a contemporary pattern that just doesn't have that information in it. You can always add certain techniques into patterns. For example, you can add bound buttonholes to a pattern that doesn't call for them. You can add pad stitching to a collar that doesn't have that in the instructions. And so if you have the books, you can elevate your projects just one little technique at a time. All right, let's get into it. Okay, I've taken my pattern out of the envelope and unfolded it, and I've sorted it into a few different piles. My pattern was already cut out because this is used, and the previous owner definitely made this coat. She has punched through anywhere there's a little dot. She's clipped the notches. She's had her way with these buttonhole markings, which is fun to see. She cut some things with pinking shears. She left some areas untrimmed, like down at the hems. Her markings are in a red marker, and she also marked with red marker here. I like that she enjoyed the pattern, and I also appreciate that she cut out the tissue for me. I hate cutting out pattern tissue. I hate it, and I hate tracing pattern tissue even more because I can't stand those tasks when I am shopping for vintage patterns. I look for ones that are already cut, but I know a lot of pattern collectors are looking for factory folded. So factory folded means it's never been taken out of the envelope. It's still folded as it was when it was purchased. And those vintage patterns tend to cost more money, and the ones that are cut cost a few dollars less, and I would prefer it cut. I know cutting patterns is controversial in some circles, but remember that vintage patterns come in one size only. So it's not as though I'm cutting this at a size and then if I wanted to make a different size later, I would have lost that opportunity. No, it's just, this is size 12. It's cut out at size 12. That's it. There wasn't any other size to be had in this envelope. Okay. We have that out of the way. This is a beautiful pattern. I think it's been thoughtfully drafted. So I have these different piles. What I have here are the front and back and the facing and the sleeve pieces. A little bit closer to you, I have the interfacing pieces, and I love when a coat pattern has separate pieces for interfacing. Super easy to draft those for yourself, but if you don't know what shape you want them, or if you don't want to do that, isn't it nice when they're already made for you? I have the Welt pocket and pocket bag here and some other pieces too, because we'll take a closer look at that. Here I have my lining pieces. Again, great sign that there are separate lining pieces. And then here I have the collar and cuff, and I pulled those out separate from everything else because those are getting a different kind of interfacing like we talked about in my last video. The other thing I'm very particular about is sleeves. I like a very wide sleeve on my coat. I want to be able to bend my elbows. I want a full range of motion. So I've gone ahead and I've pinned together my 2-piece sleeve, and I intentionally wore a very big boxy sweater. And I'm just gonna basically tissue fit this. That's great. This is a very generous sleeve and I love it. This is wonderful. And remember when you're trying on a piece of tissue, if you're someone who likes to tissue fit, that you'll have a slippery lining. So once the slippery lining is in, your arm will go through the sleeve very easily. This is really cute. I'm also seeing the length of the sleeve here. It is a little bit more cropped. I know we're adding a cuff, but I think the cuff is folded up. I'm not sure. It looks folded up in the illustration. I like it. No need to adjust the sleeve. So based on everything I've just told you, I don't think I'm going to make any fit adjustments. One place I immediately identified that I want to make a change is the back facing. This is what goes, sort of against the back of your neck inside a coat. And I like to apply my label here and make it sort of a beautiful moment inside of the coat. And I'm actually surprised by how small of a piece this is. For the front facing, this coat has it all cut as one piece with the front of the coat. So I'm looking at these two pieces together, matching the notches and matching the seam lines. I can easily see that I don't need to make any modification other than changing this curve to make this bigger. Very easy. One thing I love to do to check like the drafting is to walk my seam lines. And that means taking your pattern pieces and matching up the seam lines as they would match when you're sewing the fabric. One thing I love about vintage patterns is that the seam line is marked. So you're not matching the cut edge of your fabrics, you're matching where you're going to actually be sewing a line of stitches. And I can look at this and see everything is very beautifully drafted. There's some nice nuance in the armhole. Lovely. I really have no concerns with this pattern, so I feel comfortable in moving forward. The one place I know I want to make a big change is the pocket bag. And my reason for that is, one, I think this pocket bag is too small. I can look at it and I know that an iPhone won't fit in this pocket, and your hand would only fit if your fingers were bent. I like a huge pocket bag. Think about it, if you're wearing a glove or a mitten, you need more space in your pocket. You don't want to be like shoving it in there. It's uncomfortable. I find that vintage patterns tend to have a smaller pocket bag, so I'm going to go ahead and enlarge that. And then the method of making this welt pocket is totally fine. In sewing, there's always more than one way to skin a cat. There are many ways to install a welt pocket, and I have arrived at a way of doing it that I like. I think it's easy, it's straightforward, I love the results, and therefore that is the method I use every time I put a welt pocket on a coat. And I have my own self-drafted welt pocket pieces here that I use every time. Here's the pocket bag for the pattern, and this is my self-drafted pocket bag. You can see that it's much larger. Mine has a 1/2 inch seam allowance and this has 5/8, but even so, it's much, much bigger, it's much deeper. An iPhone fits this way with plenty of space all around it. There's a lot of room for your hand if you're wearing a mitten or something bulky like that. This is my single welt and this is their single welt. Mine is wider, but theirs is significantly deeper. So I think that I might actually go ahead and redraft mine so that it matches this proportion. I'll have to see if I'm in the mood for that or not, but I do like that it has this exaggerated shape. It is more narrow than mine, but not by that much. It's really, you're seeing the difference mostly here. The way that this pattern is forming the pocket bag is with one piece that gets folded, and then it has that signature welt pocket cut here. And this leaves you with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, which would be difficult for me because my fabric is very bulky and prone to unraveling, and I'm not using fusible interfacing. Fusible would help hold those fibers together, but I think that this would kind of be tricky with a fabric easily shredded as mine. That being said, I think this method is like totally fine. I prefer to have two pieces, and that signature welt cut is up here. Both versions are good and both versions will get you a welt pocket. I will show how I install a welt pocket in a separate video when the time comes. I'll make a tutorial using these pattern pieces. But if you look at these and you like the look of these pattern pieces and you've used this method before, I encourage you to keep using it. All right, let's take a moment and look through our instructions. I want to make sure I'm familiar with the flow this wants me to follow for making the pattern. And I'll be honest with you, I have my own order of operations when sewing a coat that I will probably adhere to more strictly than what this pattern suggests. That being said, I like to see what the pattern suggests because maybe they have drafted it in such a way that I need to do something first, or that I should save something till the end. So it's good to get that heads up at the beginning so you don't go too far down the wrong road. The other thing I want to look out for is if there are any techniques that are explained in great detail that I find helpful, or techniques that are not explained very well. And I've already looked through this pattern, so I know what's gonna happen. One of my favorite things about this pattern is that the first step. The first step is to apply some interfacing. That's normal. We all apply interfacing at the beginning of our projects. And then some ease stitching. Great. Easy. The third step is make bound buttonholes in right front at markings, or if desired, hand or machine buttonholes may be made when garment is completed. So this is saying, go ahead and make your buttonholes. Do it the way you want to do it. All right. And then we're going to check back with you in the next step. I will be honest with you. My preference is for a pattern to be written like this. I don't think that this pattern owes me an explanation of how to do bound buttonholes. There, I said it. This pattern is assuming that if you are making a tailored wool coat with a pad stitched collar and what looks like bound buttonholes on here, it's assuming you know what you're doing enough to be getting yourself into this mess. And I do. I know how to make a bound buttonhole without a tutorial. That being said, if I needed a tutorial, it doesn't need to come from here. Maybe it'll come from the Vogue sewing book. I pulled it out. Don't worry. We'll look at books in a second. So just glancing through here, I'm noticing that they are using a seam binding. So I pulled out last week that non-stretch twill tape. I could use that, or I do have a less bulky option, which is a rayon seam binding. I should have pulled this out last week too. Completely non-stretch as well, but much less bulky. It's really whisper thin. As I talked about in the last video, this is literally you're adding it into your seam line so that it won't stretch out later. And that is because fabrics like wool have the ability to stretch. So if you don't want them to, adding something like this in there is an easy fix. Great. Okay, moving through here, everything looks truly as expected. I will say it has a pretty nice explanation of pad stitching. The illustrations are very clear, but again, I think this would need supplementary material if you had never pad stitched a collar before. Oh, this is cool. One thing that I didn't even think about prior to reading these is that they're having us add a strip of bias cut hair calf interfacing to the hemline. And that's a really nice detail. I've done that before, but it's been a while since I've used the sewn interfacing for that. And I actually have a bunch of strips of bias cut interfacing back there, and I was like, should I throw these away? And I'm glad I saved them because clearly I will need them for this project. All right, that's the first page. We're getting 2 full pages of instruction. I feel like the first page kind of tackled the hard parts. For top stitching, thread machine and bobbin with buttonhole twist. I would not put buttonhole twist in my bobbin, but probably depends on your machine. Regardless if you're doing that, make sure you're using a top stitch needle or a needle with a larger eye. You're not really going to be able to get that thread through it. All right, this is great. We've got ease stitching, stay stitching, basting. Looking at the way they're doing the lining, I think I am going to adjust my lining pieces so that I can have more of a pleat at the center back. But I'm going to hold off on making that decision right now, and that's something we'll get to in the next video, which will be cutting our fabric. Okay, and then very, very clear instructions on how to do this welt pocket. Again, I don't have a problem with how they're doing the welt pocket. It's just not how I want to do it. All right, I think these are wonderful instructions, and I am going to follow them, but not like super closely because there are areas where they're saying just figure it out on your own. In those places, I'm going to use the methods I prefer, and I'm also going to show you right now some books that you might want to have on hand. These are books that are great for any tailoring project, and by tailoring I mean a jacket, a vest, a coat, maybe like a pair of wool trousers that have a welt pocket at the back, something like that. Let's get them. I'm not someone who owns an exhaustive library of sewing reference books. I moved internationally twice in the last couple of years and then moved domestically a bunch of times. And you know what can't come with you when you move a lot? Really heavy books. So I kind of narrow it down to my essentials. A lot of books have the same information and you might prefer it presented one way rather than another. So for that reason, I would say check out books from your library. You can often find these kind of books at like a used book sale. You can probably also buy them online used, but I would definitely recommend like look at a bunch of books because some of them are going to work for your brain better than others. These are the books that I really like to have on hand when I'm working on this kind of project. This pattern did make a pitch for this book, the Vogue Sewing book. So I've pulled it out. It's first published in 1970. I think there's been a lot of editions since then. You can find this used probably for a pretty good price. I don't know, I've had this one for quite a long time. As you can see, it is a thick book and it covers everything that you might need to know. This does have really great information on pad stitching, and it's interesting to look at this because it's a similar illustration style to the pattern, but more fleshed out, and it really has sort of the exact techniques that we need for the pattern, which makes sense. You know, this pattern was saying, hey, if you need more instruction, consult the Vogue Sewing book, and then we can see that instruction here. We have a winner. Then the book I reference the most for coat projects is this one, Tailoring, the Classic Guide to Sewing the Perfect Jacket. I've recommended this a ton. It is a short book. Every single technique is not explained, nor are they explained in exhaustive detail, but it's a very well photographed book. It has super clear photos, beautiful, clear photos, and it's gonna cover all of these methods. Like, I love the pad stitching in here. I think it shows you exactly what you need to do. It's the right amount of information for me. I can get the visual. If I need to read it, it says it, but it's concise. I can't recommend this book enough. Basically, if you're gonna get one book, I would say this one. If you're using this book and you're like, I want more information on a certain technique, I would say then start to seek out other books that are maybe more specific. Like there are definitely books out there that are just about making jackets. Okay, and then finally, this book's new to me. My husband got this for me for Christmas last year. It is by Allison Smith, and it's called The Tailoring Book, a step-by-step guide to creating custom garments. And I believe this author has a series of books about sewing. Beautiful, beautiful photography. So every step is really well illustrated. I already looked at pad stitching in both of those books, so let's look it up in this one as well. This one is showing you the technique, and it's actually showing you the stitch itself more close up than the other ones are, but then it's kind of dropping off. It's like, here's how to pad stitch. This is an amazing reference book. I hadn't seen this book before, and it's really beautiful, and it really covers a lot of garments. Oh, did I just see more pad stitching? Yeah, this is a great book. Okay, I recommend all three of them. But this does go into pad stitching a little bit more than what I just said, but you have to flip around. So that would be the only thing to keep in mind. The reason I recommend books is because the internet just is not what it used to be. I find you could Google something and you're gonna get wrong answers, or just like not any of the information you actually want. You might be taken to like an AI type of thing. These books are like fact-checked and tried and tested. They've been out since 1970, and these techniques have not changed. Like no aspect of this technique has changed since 1970. It's worth spending a little bit of money on a book that has all the techniques you're going to use in one place. You can have it open in front of you while you work, and it's not a screen. It's also, you know it's true. You know it's real. So that's why I like it. Also, even though I'm speaking to you through a screen right now, I try not to digitize any aspect of my sewing practice that I don't have to. I think books are the way to go. Thank you so much for joining me. I know this video might seem like we're not making progress, but it is always an essential step to review your pattern tissue and instructions before beginning a big project. My next video will be cutting out fabric and doing some prep work before we begin sewing. If you think about it, you'll always want to do certain things like have your interfacing ready. If you're using a fusible, go ahead and fuse it on. Other prep work might be things like stay stitching, stuff like that. So we'll get into that in the next video. And until then, thank you for joining me. Please like and subscribe. I hope you'll stick around for the rest of this series. We'll be getting into sequins for too long, and I think you're going to want to see that. All right, I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.